Although Albert Einstein is widely revered as the quintessential genius, he is such an Einstein, they say. Many people know very little about his body of work and its very profound, or dare I say, metaphysical implications. His theory of relativity breaks down into two parts: special relativity and general relativity. Special relativity builds itself from two opposing and well-established principles in science: the principle of relativity and the invariance of the speed of light. The principle of relativity, originally formulated by Galileo, says that whenever I say that something is moving, what I'm really saying is that it's moving relative to some stationary object. And yet, from their perspective, I'm getting further away, not them. From a third perspective, they're both moving relative to another stable body. This throws our entire conception of position in space, on which our experience and science itself relies, into disarray. A stationary perspective is called an inertial frame of reference, meaning an object traveling at constant velocity which won't change speed or direction unless acted upon by an outside force. Where the laws of physics are the same for all inertial frames of reference, we can substitute our unstable notion of motion with motion relative to a rigid body of reference. A seemingly contrary principle in science is that the speed of light is 299,792 kilometers per second, a constant denoted by c. Full stop, no caveats, no workarounds, and always. This was proven by de Sitter years before Einstein, based on double stars, that light cannot depend on the velocity of the object that it's emitted from. And so this is counterintuitive, because if I throw a baseball at 70 miles per hour parallel to a car driving 50, it will appear to the driver to go only 20 miles per hour. And yet, if we follow the same principle of relativity for a ray of light, we'll find that it must be less than c relative to the car. So it seems that these two principles contradict one another. And yet, in reality, Einstein says there's no incompatibility between relativity and the speed of light. In fact, the synthesis of the two yields special relativity, the most fruitful physical framework for understanding the universe since Isaac Newton. Imagine, if you will, an astronaut and a mission controller who doesn't move. The astronaut starts off 4 meters above the mission controller and moves 3 meters. If the astronaut travels at 60% the speed of light, according to the Lorentz transformations, which can be easily derived from the principles thus far discussed, the speed of the astronaut will be half that of a stationary observer. The astronaut's height shrinks by a factor of nearly 3. The astronaut will not feel this because he will shrink. His spacecraft will shrink proportionally. Yes, his time is slower, but so are the signals in his brain, so he experiences everything to be the same. In fact, he will perceive the stationary observer and his actions speeding up. Yet, although we, who can't travel anywhere near the speed of light, have a bias towards stationary observers, by the principle of relativity, we cannot decide in favor of one or the other. Instead, Einstein says, there are two different ways of looking at the same object. It should be clear by now that time can in no way be separated from our conception of space and position. In fact, in the CTMU, time is the distributed processing for space, thrusting it into the future such that it can exist and evolve. Einstein takes that a step further and adjoins to our standard XYZ coordinate plane a t-axis, meaning every object can be treated instead as an event, a thing which exists in a particular position at a particular time. And if we take every event which is, was, or ever will be, we can build a 4-dimensional block with each cross-section representing a frozen frame of 3-dimensional space. After having built our 4D Lego universe, we can now see that as you approach the processing speed for reality, the rate at which the universe rescales, beyond which an object in motion has 0 extension and infinite mass, you're just seeing a different cross-section of the 4D block universe as your stationary friend. Just like what we see is a 2D representation of 3D reality of light rays at right angles to our eyes, and we understand that things look different from different angles. The 3D distance we measure is just a 3D projection of 4D reality. So relativity can be explained simply that observers in relative motions have different viewpoints and thus observe different projections of 4D reality. As a consequence of relativity, the kinetic energy of an object can no longer be found by the equation my physics teacher taught me, kinetic energy equals 1/2 mv squared, but instead must equal m times the speed of light squared divided by the square root of 1 minus v squared over c squared. where an infinite amount of energy can thusly be derived from a finite mass as V approaches C, the fundamental substance of the universe, according to Einstein, is not matter, but instead energy, which can neither be created or destroyed. Einstein says he believes in Spinoza's God, an impersonal structuring force which gives harmony to all that exists, allowing for the emergence of the 4D arbitrary and deterministic block universe. Despite the clear vision and sheer genius of Einstein's special relativity, it's evident it needs a revamp. The trouble with relativity is not that it's untrue, but that it's incomplete. When we consider the view of the universe relativity gives us, we end up with nothing but an arbitrary and deterministic 4D manifold, with no distinction between past, present, and future. It's completely determined. The CTMU fuses every event with its metaphysical/metalinguistic dual, which creates the reality it describes, and thereby replacing an event, an infinitesimal point, with a syntactic operator, which transforms the rules and structures of the language creating reality according to an intrinsic end or purpose set to it, and are able to take on spatiotemporal extension as the expression of this teleology, like shadows cast on a wall. When you take all of these syntactic operators together, instead of getting a block universe, you get what Chris Langan calls conspansive manifold, a metamathematical structure which describes and generates how reality exists and evolves over time, embedding the universe in a tapestry of infinite expansive potential from which the order that is good can be extracted out through telic recursion. Think of it as the block universe dipped in God. Further, where human beings inherit the self-generative freedom of the universe, we are thus metasyntactic operators, or secondary tellers, who can express our intrinsic ends as a generative and creative force and collapse multi-potential fields into states and thusly participate in the creation of the universe in a generative and self-deterministic way. Langan says that perhaps the most important change in our worldview will come from learning that living, breathing human beings are not just chemical scum or accidents of random mutations supervening on brute physical phenomena, but are integral to the evolution and existence of reality itself. This principle will be fleshed out further in our next video on John Wheeler's idea of the participatory universe. Stay tuned for that. The light shine forth in the darkness, and the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.